talking about teams today. You guys should have some experience with it now. Right? So what's a team? We have this definition up here, but I want to hear from you guys as to what you think a team is. How do you define a team?
A group.
A group?
Together.
Someone said a group. What'd you say?
Cohesively work together on something.
Cohesively work together. All right. Anybody else? It's important to note that a team usually has a common goal. Regardless of what type of team it is, everybody is working towards something. That should be a common something, a common goal. So there's different types of teams. We have short and long term, right? That's gonna depend on what's the task at hand. You have cross-functional teams, virtual teams, task forces, and committees. These are all different types of teams. And they will depend on, again, what the task is, what the time frame is. What do you think that your teams are for group projects? You see that as a short-term or a long-term team? Right, it's a short-term team. It's a team that you're, forming for a month or a few weeks. Again, to have a common goal, which is to get a good grade and be successful in the project. A long-term team, can anybody think of an example of a long-term team?
Family.
Family, that's a good one. Or it could be a sports team. They have to play together for 6 to 9 months. But family's a good one because that's throughout a lifetime. So that's a good one. So it's a challenge, right? You already know this. You face challenges working in your groups. For formal teams, educational training for doctors and nurses are rare. They don't get training on how to work together in a hospital right before they get there, right? No. However, we all know that teamwork is pretty much what healthcare is. If you're working in the healthcare environment, at some point you will work in a team. You will work with a team. But again, in most cases, you guys should be fortunate to say that you don't fall into this scenario because you're getting training on working in teams. However, in most cases, there's not a lot of preparation for teamwork in schools before people get into their jobs, which is one of the reasons why I do this, why I put you all in teams so that you will have preparation before you get into your jobs. So we have clinical versus managerial, right? A lot of times the conflicts that happen between doctors and nurses are why. Anybody have any suggestions?
Say it again.
Why do doctors and nurses fight? Why can't they get along? Why can't they work together as a team?
One higher than the other.
One's higher than the other. Doctors want to be in charge, right? They're like, work together for what? I'm a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to be in charge, right? Okay. Well, when they do work together, they're working from a clinical perspective, clinical team. They're advocating for the patient. Their goal, their common goal is to provide a positive outcome for the patient, right? We as managers, we're looking at it from a managerial lens, from a managerial perspective. As managers, we're trained to look at not just the patient, but also the organization, right? So we have to look at both. There's a difference. So there can be some benefits to an effective team, right? If it goes right, if it's successful, there's definitely some benefits. Here are a few. Obviously, if we're speaking in terms of a healthcare environment, if we have an effective team, we're having healthier patients. We're improving quality of care, right? We're increasing our patient satisfaction. Patients are going home happier and healthier. We're using our services more efficiently, which means we're probably saving money, right? And we're increasing job satisfaction of our employees. And last, we're being more productive. We're being efficient and productive, which again, in most cases means we're probably saving money, cutting costs. So these are all benefits of having an effective team. So, in the perspective of a higher level manager, effective teams is going to look like this. Improved communication. Again, we talked about productivity. What about decreased absenteeism? If we have an effective team, people probably are going to be more willing to come in to work. If they like their team, they're working together, and they're being productive, and they have a good collegial relationship going on, they probably will go down. And again, which will turn into decreased turnover, right? Which we already talked about is very key on saving money when we have decreased turnover. So, you guys already know there's some costs to teamwork, right? Some things you may have to give up or relinquish for a little while. So we got the meeting time. That's the cost, right? You gotta figure out when you're gonna meet. That means you have to sacrifice some time. You may have to sacrifice a little bit more gas if you have to drive to a certain location to meet with your team, right? Which brings us to opportunity costs. I'm sure at some point somebody's thought about what they could have been doing while they were meeting with their team. I could be at the pool or at the gym or whatever it may be. Opportunity costs. You're thinking about how you can spend that time doing something else. All right, what else are we sacrificing? Power. If I'm working in a team, I may not be able to be in charge, right? Mm-hmm. So there may be some loss of autonomy. Sacrifice for the team. Which goes along with, it's a risk. When you give up your power, your autonomy, you're taking a risk. So that's obviously a cost, right? And then the last one, resistance. Resistance to organizational change, right? Which sometimes happens with teamwork. You're doing something out of the ordinary that you don't usually do. This is different from your job sitting at the desk every day. There's a few different stages of teamwork and working in teams, and we'll go through these quickly. The first stage is forming. This has to do with formation of the team. Getting your team together, if you don't know each other, introduction, finding out things about each other, discussing the goals. This is kind of like the introduction stage of teamwork. All right? So then we have storming. Storming sounds like a negative word, right? Kind of storming, you think about storms. Well, that's exactly what it is, a storm. Conflict stage, right? Conflicts are gonna come at the beginning of the formation of the team because everyone doesn't know everybody, doesn't know their skills, their capabilities. People are still trying to let go of their power. So there's gonna be a little conflict in the beginning, right? That's what happens at the storming stage. Still some resistance going on here. Next stage is performing. We've gotten over our conflict. Everybody's agreed to get along, at least for the purpose of the team and the goal, right? So at this stage, we've actually started doing some work. we've sat down, we're talking with each other, we're figuring out that Carmen is better at doing this portion. So we're sharing information, we're moving towards our goal. The next step, adjourning. It's pretty much the ending. At this point, you've worked together, you've developed respect, right? This is kind of where you disband, where the team breaks up. So let's stop here and talk about these stages for a little bit. Which stage you think is most important? Yeah, forming, storming, performing, and adjourning. Performing. Why?
You and your team members perform the task well.
So you say performing. All right. Does everybody agree? What we have?
Storming.
Storming.
I think if you can't get through that stage, if there's just too much conflict, if you can't get through it, it affects
The performance.
the performance.
All right. That's true. Anybody else? Agree with both of them? Disagree with both of them?
I agree with both, and
I
I think
do too.
forming is very important because
But we can't help what group we in. If our boss or something chooses us in a group, we have to cope with it, even if we don't like it. To keep us out.
That's a mature response.
Mhm.
Everybody's not gonna be that mature though.
Well, they do their job. You can't go off with somebody else.
All right, so I mean, everybody had a good point. Each stage is very important. It's important to know that each stage has purpose.
What would you say?
What would I say? I think I'm torn. I'm torn between forming and storming. I think forming is very important because this is the orientation time. This is when you should be establishing what your goals are. So, kind of like what you said about storming, I feel the same way about forming. If you haven't established tasks and goals here, everything else is just,
Okay.
it's not going to be good. However, I think storming is very important also because while conflict sounds like such a bad word, sometimes conflict is good. It's good to have some debate, some conflict going on because this is when people are presenting ideas. And someone may conflict with your idea, but their idea may be better than yours. It happens. So without conflict, you start getting that group think where everybody's just like, okay, yeah, that sounds fine. And sometimes what happens with group think is you end up with a mediocre product. So I think that both of these are important. Which one's most important? I don't know, I'm kind of torn. I'm torn. I mean, performing is important also because this is where that work is actually done. So, that was important also. But I think before you can get here, you have to get through the other two. So, what are some questions that you can ask when you're assigned to a team? When you guys get in your team, what are some questions that you ask?
What are your
Which
strengths?
part
and
you like to?
What are your
strengths?
strengths? Doing?
What'd you say?
Oh, which part of the project would you like?
Which part of the project would you like? What'd you say?
What are you capable of doing?
All right, what are you capable of doing? Anybody else? Is there an important one that no one said yet?
Oh, in a group,
Yeah.
are you willing to work and do the work?
All
What's
right.
your availability?
There we go.
Yeah.
What's your
Availability.
Right.
When can we meet outside?
You
of
gotta
the-
meet, right? Let's look at some of these. What are the goals of the team? That's important, right?
Mhm.
We gotta figure out what our goals are so we can know what to work towards. How are we gonna measure them? How do we do that? If we're talking about your team projects and you have your first meeting and you say, what are the goals? Everybody's gonna say, well, to get an A or whatever, to do a good job. Then your next question might be, well, how are we gonna measure that? Well, you could say, we're gonna set dates and for everyone to have their stuff turned in by, and that's how we'll measure if we're moving towards that goal of getting an A. Deadlines. It's important. First meeting, you need to establish deadlines. When's this due? All right, when are we gonna have it done? So deadlines are important. When are we gonna meet and where? It's important. To whom do I report? While that's not really relevant to you guys in your example, it's an important question. What is my role in the team? Somebody said that, or something close to that. What are my responsibilities? You guys said that one also. All right, so managers. How do managers play into teamwork, right? Well, one thing is, a good manager is not going to mind if someone's asking questions, right?
Right.
We like questions as managers, right?
Some. Not all, some.
So, what questions don't we like? We
I don't
like the
know,
hard
like,
ones.
oh my God, you can tell by their body language, you know. People, I mean, some managers,
I asked my manager a question, maybe like 2 weeks ago, about the Western Union. Her response was, "Oh my God, here y'all go." Really?
but good managers don't
Shit.
mind.
What was your response?
I got an attitude, which probably wasn't the right thing, but she just upset me.
We'll talk about that later. Good managers are coaches, mentors, obviously, and they want thoughtful observations, right? Thoughtful is the key word. So as a manager, when you get to choose a team, some things you want to look for. What's some things you want to look for?
Quality.
You want a leader.
One.
One leader.
One.
So you want a strong leader. What else?
Someone who's dependable.
Someone's dependable.
Someone who's willing to go outside of their comfort zone.
All right, step outside of my comfort zone.
Flexible.
Creative, flexible. Let's see what we got here. This person belongs to the area, so we want somebody that can relate to whatever we're talking about, right? They belong to the area that's affected by the problem at hand. So what that means is, if we're thinking in terms of your group project again, we want to make sure that in your team, you don't have somebody from another class, right? They're not gonna know what you're talking about. So you want to make sure that this person's knowledgeable and that they're affected by the problem at hand. Somebody said it. They want to make sure they have the knowledge and skills to do the tasks. A clearly defined role on a team. You kind of said that when you were talking about a leader. Do they have the authority to make decisions? Right? Can they follow through on assignments and tasks? Can they meet deadlines? Can they think beyond the confines of the department or discipline? You guys said a lot of these. Can they work well with others? How do they handle conflict? You gotta choose somebody that's good at handling conflict. Otherwise, what happens?
Everything just disperses, fall apart.
Fall apart, right? In handling conflict, it can be difficult because you want to handle the conflict, but you don't want to take sides. You want to be fair. So it can be difficult. What about having a sense of humor?
Yes.
It helps, right?
Yes.
That's me, most definitely.
Conflict.
Do they have a good reputation as a team player? Important, right? You want to make sure that they value contributions from other people. Just because they're a leader, they still have to be open to receive what other ideas people have. And you want to make sure that they embrace the organization's goals more than they embrace their own, which can be very important.
Just leave her.
let's talk about emotions. Because emotions tend to be heavy in teams, right?
Attitudes, whatever.
I would say attitudes. Emotions. I mean, you know, attitude can affect emotions,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I do not.
So what did you tell your manager? Loretta?
But we'll talk about that later.
We're not talking about that yet. Can you pay attention to
So-
this lecture?
It's important to know that people can read emotions very quickly, right?
Right.
It takes a second to figure out how somebody's feeling or what kind of, you know, attitude they're in today, right? Teammates can easily catch this, right?
Yep.
Can read it. We're all pretty smart people, right? So we can read it. And this is important in leadership.
Enthusiasm.
Very important. Why? Because it's critical to how you lead other people. The way that you present yourself, the type of emotions you have, the type of personality you have, all affect your ability to lead and influence other people. So if we loop this back into our subject today, which is teamwork, if we're thinking in terms of a team that has positive emotions can do what?
Great thing.
Great things, can be very successful, they're gonna be productive, right? Now let's think about it on the other side. A team with negative emotions can be detrimental, right? To the organization. So when you're working in your teams, remember this. Keep this in mind. Positive emotions, right? Keep these things in mind when you're working in your teams. Does anybody know what a participative work climate means? Participative means those that are willing to work with one another and participate, right? Again, we talked about the healthcare environment being one where we're working in teams all the time. So obviously, those that are participative are going to have better customer service, better patient outcomes. It's going to reduce turnover, less errors, right? Because if you're participative and working together, you're working together to make sure that you're not making errors. Or if you see someone making an error, you're going to be comfortable with saying, hey, you know, you're pouring too much or whatever it may be. So, some research was done in 1997 by these researchers, and they found that effective teams work with more information. You might say, why do they work with more information? Well, they're effective, right? Which means that everybody's doing their portion, so they're going to have more information. They develop multiple alternatives. Again, that's going to happen because everybody's working, everybody's thinking, using their brains, contributing, so you're going to have multiple alternatives. Effective teams had common goals. They used humor. They found that humor was found in effective teams. They maintained balance of power, which means, again, everybody worked together. There wasn't one person trying to take over. And they kept the focus on the facts and not on personalities. Sure, you may have someone in your team that has a negative attitude, but the facts are, we need an A. So if you keep focus on the goal and what the facts are, rather than focusing on how someone's acting or how someone's feeling that day, you're more likely to be effective. Crew resource management. Does anybody know anything about this? It's something that's been used in the airline industry for a while. And basically it deals with them working as a team or as a crew, as they call it, to be efficient and improve their performance.
No, they have to, because they get fined.
Right. Well,
Finally.
in recent years, healthcare organizations have tried to use this same philosophy and apply it to healthcare. Because if you think about it, in some ways it's the same. If we think about crew resource management and as it relates to airlines, the airline industry is transporting hundreds, thousands, millions of people every day. And they have to transport these people safely, or that's their common goal at least. So it's very important for them to work together. They can't fight. You can't have pilots fighting. You know what I mean? It's not the same as someone working somewhere else and fighting and they're not being productive. But in an airline situation, they have to work together, right? To be able to successfully transport all these people safely every day. So if you translate that over to the healthcare industry, you know, people in the healthcare industry are working with hundreds, thousands, millions of people every day to make sure that they have healthy outcomes. So it's just as important in the healthcare industry for everybody to work together because, again, we're dealing with lives just as they are in the airline industry. One mistake could cause someone to die, right? Depending on what the error is. So in recent years, the healthcare industry has tried to translate the crew resource management philosophy from the airline industry over to the healthcare industry. So, in our team process, there's a few how-tos. You may be thinking, how to what? But we'll get to it. As a team leader, one how-to is ask for ideas. Again, as the leader, just because you are leading the group, you don't want to necessarily take over. You still want to make sure that you're open to receive ideas and contributions from everyone else in your team. So the first how-to for a leader is ask for ideas. Now, once you ask for ideas, you want to receive it. You don't want to just let it come in one ear and go out the other ear, right? Just to make it appear like you're being concerned. Acknowledge the input. Write it down. Don't just, ask for it. So you want to ask for the ideas and acknowledge that input. Even if it may seem a bit far-fetched in the beginning, who knows, you may be able to use it. So just go ahead and write it down to start out with, and then you can refer back to it to see if you can actually use it. Another how-to. Don't interrupt. And don't allow other people to interrupt. If you see someone else interrupting someone else, just say, let's let them finish, or whatever it is you say. Why is this one important?
You need to hear, you need to listen to what the other person's saying, out of respect.
Yes, respect. Respect, and you want to be able to acknowledge input. So if people are interrupting people, you can't hear what's going on. So it's important to make sure that nobody's interrupting, not only because it's the respectful thing to do, but because you want to be able to actually acknowledge everything.
We used to say no sidebars in our meetings.
No sidebars.
Mm-hmm.
What about this? Ask critics for suggestions. You may have someone in your group that has nothing positive to say. Every time someone suggests something, nah, that doesn't sound good. Nah, that doesn't make sense. No, that's not feasible. Ask them, all right, well, what do you think? Let's hear your contribution. What are your ideas? So you want to make sure that you involve everyone, including the critics, when you're asking for ideas and getting input.
Is it wise to start with them first? I mean, try that tactic because you know they're going to have some kind of negative.
You might want to start with them first. Yeah. It depends. Yeah.
I think I always look at things in a critical way first. I don't know if the military taught me to do that, or, like in a negative way and then try to make it positive.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the critic first may help, and then at least that way you can say, well, we gave you the opportunity to
try to counteract that negative.
Yeah.
And another how-to as a team leader is obviously you want to remain calm. if things escalate or conflict comes, you wanna make sure that you remain calm, cause you're the leader. If you get out of control, then there's definitely not gonna be any order.
It's like that pilot that went crazy on the plane and started like chanting Islam or something, like
Yeah.
Islam's gonna blow us up or.
Leader has to remain calm. So now we talked about the leader how-tos. Let's talk about team members. Team members only have one thing to do, right? Follow through. Look here, team leader has all these tasks. Team members has one task, right? Seems pretty easy, right? So as a team member, you want to make sure that you follow through. It's key. If you don't follow through, what happens is other people have to pick up your slack. No one's going to be happy about that. And then we go back to our emotions, and this is when things start getting really emotional, because no one wants to have to do something that you're supposed to be doing. We're all adults, right? So what are some critical elements? The summary of the meeting is shared. That's key. After you meet, there should always be a summary of the meeting, whether that be through email or whatever it is, or whether it be verbally at the end of your meeting. But whatever it is, at the conclusion of your meeting, either verbally or by email, it should be something that says, per our meeting, this is what we discussed. You know, person 1 is gonna do X, person 2 is gonna do Y, we're gonna meet again next week, everybody's gonna have their work done by this date. It's kind of a recap. Another critical element, follow up and follow through. What this means is, as the leader, this is probably something that they should spearhead. So if you meet on Monday, maybe the next Monday you need to send out an email to follow up saying, hey guys, just checking in to see how things are going. You know, and then that way, if anyone's having issues, they can speak then and say, actually, I'm having trouble finding research on my part. Then we're working through whatever issues we have because we're following up and we're not waiting until the day before the deadline to say, all right, is everybody done? So follow-up is critical. And if you're following up like you need to be, more than likely people are gonna follow through, right? So those two are very key. So, talked about conflict during the storming stage. It's gonna happen. Even if it's an effective team, there will be conflict. Because everybody thinks differently. Everybody's gonna have different ideas. So, we need to know how we're gonna manage it. How we're gonna manage the conflict. So we have a few different ways. Bargaining, voting, problem solving, research, and mediation. Who can give me an example of bargaining? In terms of a team project, a group project. All right.
All can do it.
Well, that's not really bargaining though. A bargain might be, Carmen, I'm having trouble with completing my part. Can you help me out? And if you help me out, I'll speak more. I will speak, a couple extra minutes in class.
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
It's a bargain, right?
Mhm.
We're working through our conflict, which is me not being able to finish my part. Right? So that's a bargain. So that's one way. Voting. Obviously, everybody knows what that is, right? We having a conflict. We don't know if we want to use pink or purple in our presentation. Because it gets that deep sometimes. We're going to vote. All right. Everybody raise your hand if you want pink. Everybody raise your hand if you want purple, right? So voting is one way to manage conflict. Problem solving. Let's talk about this one. How are we going to problem solve through our conflict? We don't problem solve?
First, figure out what the problem is.
All right, well, let's say, all right, so somebody give me a problem.
The
In your
team
group
member
project.
is not accessible, they're not meeting.
All right, that's a good problem. That's a good one. So we can't agree to a time to meet. People aren't accessible. So how are we gonna problem solve through that?
We didn't
Fine.
have that time, I'm thinking
Maybe we have to have a meeting over the phone instead of in person.
Conference or email or Skype
Or Skype, or chat, or whatever, right?
So if we email and it doesn't have, we don't get a response, we have no phone number. So then we're back to square one, so it's up to the other team members
So
to come
then-
up with a plan.
Yeah, in that case, the
Have to
problem
come up.
solving might be working with what you have
Okay.
and working with those members that are available to meet. So it does kind of depend on what the issue is. But problem solving is definitely a way to manage conflict. All right, research. We use the same example. Well, we can't find, a way to get everybody together to meet. Research. Maybe we need to go to Dr. Haynes, see if she can find a phone number for us. Right?
Right.
More than likely, I can get a phone number. So we're researching. We're digging deeper to try to figure out more information about how we can get to this person to get them to meet, right? So research. And mediation.
Dr. Haynes.
You.
That'll be me. It happens. People contact me, Dr. Haynes, so-and-so is in meeting, what are we gonna do? All right, so then I step in as the mediator to try to corral everybody in to work together, or whatever the case may be, right? So, those are all examples of the conflict management. Hopefully, this will help you in working with your teams, and you can figure out which method works best for you. All right, that's it. Yes, ma'am.
This is totally off subject, but
All
next
right.
time, can we have the lights on? I get sleepy when they're off. I'm back here asleep, so.